Out. Ben, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you both for being here. My name is Benjamin Yablon. I am a special advisor to the OECD, specifically focused on blockchain. I'm joined by my co-host, Cyrus Hodes, also a special advisor to the OECD, specifically focused on artificial intelligence. Together, Cyrus and I have seen quite a bit of overlap between these two technologies. And have launched a web interview series with quite a few very interesting people in the space that have some dramatic intersections between the two. We're joined today by Siim Sikkut, the former government chief information officer of Estonia. At the Estonian government role, Siim led the National Digital Policy and Digital Government Strategy and Delivery. Siim also chaired the OECD Working Party of Senior Digital Government Officials. Siim is globally in demand as a keynote speaker and has been recognized as one of the world's most influential people in digital government by Apolitical. And for our viewers, if you don't know what Estonia has done for e-government, you've been hiding under a rock for the past several months. So Estonia is way ahead of the curve and has been for quite some time. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to my co-host Cyrus for an introduction, and we'll kick off this interview.
Thanks, Ben. I'm very excited to be with you, Siim. It's been a while.
Thank you.
So like you have, I work on tech policy, and I'm coming from a policy angle rather than the tech angle, and wholeheartedly embrace that. We worked together when I was at the UAE Prime Minister's office and with the Estonian government to sign a cooperation agreement between the two countries. So, and I like, UAE, Estonia, two small countries, punching above their weight, but very, very successfully. So, super glad to have you here. So, first question: you're one of the first implementers for government to have fully embraced digital technology, while establishing also safeguards, which is important, and you guys did that very successfully. What are the main takeaways from the Estonian experience that you can mention to the rest of the world to deploy AI and blockchain technologies at the government level?
Well, first of all, thanks really for having me, of course, and exactly, always glad to share from Estonian side of things, even if I'm retired from government now myself. And exactly now we take this sort of experience to other countries around the world with Digital Nation, a group who I run. But look, I think the way to answer the best is that, so in that sense, for us, AI and blockchain were no different from any other sort of cycles of innovation, or let's say they were part of like a longer continued journey of going digital in the whole of public sector of Estonia. So what was the way to get it done? I mean, so we started 25 years or so back when internet was just going mainstream, and so after those 25 years, Estonia has reached a point where almost anything and everything you need to do with the government, as well as everything that happens backstage, at the underbelly of government, the back end, is fully digital. So the only options are to get married, you still have to show up, and get divorced, but that's also for non-technological reasons. That's part of the safeguards. Now, to reach that, what has been instrumental, I would say a few things. First of all, platforms, going strongly, building stuff on top of platforms and like a platform logic. So things like digital identity back in the day, or X-Road for data sharing. So these common building blocks, but as these are in place, then different agencies don't have to reinvent those wheels, and they can just basically churn out and focus on transforming their services to the best of their ability. So we took the same approach to, for example, AI as well. So when we started as one of the pioneers, like AI uptake in government, we immediately made it a conscious effort saying, hey, can we build some common components out as platforms that others then reuse? So like common, or reusable chatbot module or core engine even, right? You just basically pick it up from repo, you just retrain with your data as the next agency, you're up live faster in a way. So we brought this in quite successfully, and so platforms accelerate the change is my point here, even with the new technology. Secondly, we really have done quite a bit, I think, in the legal space to really build up like the widest of policy and legal framework, and not just to enable uptake of tech and new stuff as well, but also actually to push us in the direction. So, classically that led us to something like once only, whereas, our citizens don't have to submit data to the government again, rather the government has to use in the back end. So the same thing, we looked at AI saying, hey, so when we start to bring in the clauses where, for example, it would be full legit for government to rely on automated decision making if done by, for example, like a decision engine, right? So to really just say, hey, well, that actually should be the default way of doing things, perhaps. So we're kicking through regulation to do more, not just removing the barriers. And mind you, for governments, regulation is like the main tool classically, right? And the third thing, very briefly here, well, the risks are always there, but we've been very conscious about them. And we've always had an approach to, okay, so let's figure out how do we manage the risks? Risks in privacy, cybersecurity, or let's say when we talk about new tech, then yeah, obviously there's risks of misuse of AI, but let's then figure out how to prevent that, and rather than just basically then not use AI at all. So this sort of mindset, and this is really everything from how we design systems, how we run them, to the sort of wider framework of law around, to then being ready when stuff hits the fan. There's a whole range of things we do with that mindset to enable to be digital. And my last point, I'm giving a very long answer, but experimentation. Look, what has driven cycle and after cycle of this digital transformation in our government has been willingness to try stuff out. That's what took us to blockchain, before even blockchain was a word, basically distributed ledgers. That's what took us to AI early on. That's what allowed us to bring in e-residency as the first country in the world. So it's been a willingness to also politically to try stuff out and allow for safe experimentation to happen, also in very close partnership with the industry, for example, in open innovation mode and stuff. So willingness for that has been a very big part, and now experimentation is even like a strategy for the government, I would say. You consciously try things out while you keep, of course, the core running.
Makes sense. That's a really compelling answer. I like the way that you approached that, because it partially answers a piece of what I'm going to ask next. So we're basing this series on conversations on and around AI and blockchain, centering on the OECD's AI principles and blockchain recommendations.
Right.
Can you cite picked up examples of successful Estonian deployments with both of these techs outside of an excellent one you just mentioned, which is the e-residency? Are there others that you would want to highlight on the deployment side?
Yeah, I mean, if I just zoom into this particular two sets of technology, right? I mean, with blockchain, starting with that one first, why we were very early on, even before, anything Bitcoin and stuff like that, going to blockchain or distributed ledgers mode, because we didn't see any other solution to solve for data integrity. And I mean, going back to what I said before, we always try to figure out how to manage the risks of being digital. So confidentiality, we could have some solutions for, right? Basically availability, I mean, again, easier to solve, but integrity, to really make sure that your data is not tampered. I mean, so that was not enough, not a good way. So we started bringing blockchains in for that reason. And for example, keeping metadata about sort of like health records or stuff like that in blockchain mode, essentially. And so that was a way to then exactly have additional, proof of an assurance that, for example, my blood type doesn't get changed without proper authorization, right? So that was the instrumental, and like we churned this out from like use case or registry to registry in a way. In AI, we started really with a premise that there's a lot of low-hanging fruits, even with very narrow machine learning applications out there. So, and look, a lot of the stuff our phones can do that we were not using in government even at the time, right? So one of our sort of, this is perhaps random, but one of our early use cases was trying to get rid of inspectors going blindly to inspect agricultural plots around the country. For example, our subsidies properly used. Instead, we trained the machines to do like risk analysis based on satellite imagery and detect then sort of changes in landscape, for example. And then from that, now inspections became targeted. A very classic AI use case is optimization, right? Optimization and being more targeted in the work you do. Example of that, immediately, I think in 3 months, the system had paid its development cost off because now it was effective inspections. But other than that, I mean, there's a range of stuff. I mean, starting from classic chatbot stuff, like when Corona crisis hit or COVID crisis hit, then immediately we were able to turn a lot of helpline or crisis line call center activity away, but just by bringing a trained chatbot in quickly. And all the way to now, like even I think 2 years ago, we still had in our courts and parliaments people typing up proceedings, right? And again, that's something our phone can do basically, even though yes, we have our lovely language in Estonia. Now it's automatic, real-time transcription happening with that. So like a range of things where we can see that, yeah, we can rely really on smart machines much more and reap effectiveness for the public sector.
Excellent.
So I had the pleasure to be, with you and government colleagues at the Tallinn Digital Summit.
Yes.
So you're mentioning that, Estonia has been using blockchain before it was called blockchain. Also, so there's no surefire way to please everyone in the blockchain ecosystem. Have you navigated? I'm interested to find out how you have navigated the interplay between public and private blockchains.
Well, so I think there's a longer sort of background to that in a way. So Estonian digital government sort of achievements, if you wish, have very much often been the product of community co-creation and working together. Community, I mean, industry, academic people, government, so forth, right? I mean, part of the reason is that we don't have any claim that we can have the best and smartest in government. So for various reasons. But secondly, also that this is really a conscious strategy to get past your small size. I mean, Cyrus, you mentioned our small size at the beginning, right? So, I mean, look, if your bench is short, you can make it bigger, longer by being as open as you can in terms of innovation approach, at least. So this is me saying that as with blockchain, it so happened that we had this academic community and then industry started to come up with, very early, very, very early solutions around the distributed ledgers and how the mathematical proofs and stuff like that worked out. Then we just embraced that innovation around us and took it into use in government because it promised a potential problem solving solution to the problem we had of data integrity. And mind you, it worked. So from that, I mean, there was a issue of scaling then. So this is one of the reasons why we went sort of, let's say, public blockchain mode, because we were tapping into what was there around us, as opposed to trying to build things again for us or trying to, let's say, replicate the thing in a way. And my second point is, especially around blockchain, because we're using it for a specific case of integrity. Well, integrity is really, let's say, how do you trust the watchdog? You make it transparent and public. So basically, everybody can keep an eye, for example, and see, for example, what are the keys to validate the authenticity of my blood type, even if you wish to, right? So that really, I mean, the particular case or the problem we were solving for necessitated going very public way, actually.
Maybe a quick follow-up question, since I mentioned the Tallinn Digital Summit.
Yeah.
I'm very interested to find out if other countries who participated have taken lessons learned from Estonia and implemented in their countries from what you've seen.
Well, to be fair, I mean, now you're asking a really very specific question. I mean, Tallinn Digital Summit is less about trying to showcase Estonia and trying to bring like-minded countries together to go create a future in a way, right? So perhaps we've seen less of what you are asking for from that particular event format, which is still ongoing, I'm glad to say. But largely speaking, we've had a very healthy interest against Estonia's journey and the solutions by our industry and partners and whatever for the last 15 years, right? So So that's why I guess, like Benjamin quietly said, I mean, we've become a bit known in the world because, well, exactly, countries have been coming to try to learn and distill the nuggets of wisdom out of here, right? And more they're putting this in practice. I mean, look, I wouldn't be in the business that I do these days if they wouldn't. but yeah, about 120 countries around the world have taken some Estonian digital experience on board. On AI and blockchain, I think that's still emerging only way, but that has to do with, I guess, the state of AI and blockchain adoption in public sectors around the world. I mean, that maturity in a way, to my taste and eye at least, is only starting still.
I think that's a great segue into one of our final questions. We'll get into a final question and then some predictions for the future.
All right.
Really, have there been hurdles related to recognition by other jurisdictions in terms of e-government services that another jurisdiction might need to rely upon? Has that been part of the experience? And what are the lessons to pass on to other jurisdictions looking to move toward e-governance in the deployment phase? You know, you've gone through this in real time and successfully. There must have been some hurdles and some things that went very smoothly. And if you were specifically advising other similar jurisdictions, what would you recommend for them?
Yeah, so there are actually two big questions now at once. Well, first of all, Estonia being a member of the European Union, and which is, you know, built on a single market, right? So you have this great interdependency of, you know, goods movements and services movements, people movement, capital moving, whatever, right? Then in a way, there is some interdependence also in the digital space, but not as much as even we from Estonia would like to. So basically, if you still cross the borders from country to country in the union and try to move goods or move to work in another country, there's still paperwork and stuff involved. And we've been trying to help and push in this direction for years. And look, it's slowly becoming better. So the way to answer it, Ben, is that, so I mean, these hurdles and sort of, let's say, recognition has not popped up enough in a way, because just this cross-border digital single market, the digital, you know, integrations are not perhaps as advanced as we would like them to be, right? So literally, it's not enough of an issue because not enough is happening cross-border in a way, or not enough linkages in a way. But
you're almost like a Tesla without enough charging stations.
Sort of, or rather, I would say this way: that look, you can just drive a Tesla within one territory. You basically can't cross the border in a way, right? That's more, I think, the sort of analogy. But I think we're getting there. And look, I mean, but we already have some cases, for example, in the whole of European Union, digital signatures are supposed to be legit, but effectively still, if you go to with an Estonian signature or digitally signed document to another country, it's very hard to practically have this recognition. So there's a lot of practical work to be done in that case. And the hurdle is really catching up in speed from that point of view. Now, the second hard part of your question, well, we have failed many times, especially, look, if you're trying to go first, that's okay. And so, I mean, that's built into this experimentation mode of ours. But I think when we have failed massively, and there's been quite a few times of that as well, there's been two conditions: making things too complex, too big, in terms of architecture, in terms of, like, you know, classic waterfall stuff and so forth, right? You basically build stuff that's bound to fail just because, you know, it's like you know, falls under its own size and weight in a way, if that makes sense, right? So that's why we, through these hard lessons, we really are big fans of like a microservice approach and building small things, modular stuff in a way, like more like a Lego house than just like, you know, chunk in a way. This is a very technical, perhaps, like way to answer it, but it also has effect in terms of how you even devise like a digital transformation. Like, do you go iteratively by small steps like startups do, for example, or try to build like massive shock therapy change stuff? Usually the latter one doesn't work. And the second thing when we have failed is perhaps exactly been when we have not been collaborating enough in a way. So going back to the open innovation story before. So if we really have been arrogant enough to think that we know best in government how to build stuff, and which means that, you know, you lock yourself into a path dependency and then you're stuck with it. That's why, for example, cloud uptake was so late here in Estonia, despite all our digital maturity otherwise. So because, yeah, we had been locked into like a certain certain trajectory in a way, right? And now it's being phased finally to be cloud native in a way. So long story short, I think sort of, yeah, being humble in a way, being open to listening people around you to what is the best of the practice out there and how to really do stuff. And finally, yeah, be keeping stuff small and sort of tangible enough in a way. I think these are some of the things that I would say out. And the last thing on that note, so if you really ask, let's say, what's our usual advice to other governments? In a way, in the end, it's 3 words: just do it. There's a lot of people talking about stuff, a lot of people talking about why not to do stuff. Just start doing it. So
Right.
that's the only way to actually make change. You deliver. I mean, running a marathon starts from the first step, right? So
You have some really interesting pieces there. I like how you compared the successful implementation in some of these government services to running a startup, and rather than going in with a completely baked plan, you go in with a nimble approach that's going to be that's going to be iterative, that you're going to see what works and continue with it and change course if necessary. That makes a ton of sense. And the other very, very cool thing you said around the acceptance of something like a digital token representative of identity, and how the challenges of having that function cross-border reminds me of a gigantic organization that we're all quite familiar with. It seems to be really good at some standard setting work and helping to create exactly these kinds of dialogues and international conversations. And I think this is exactly what the OECD work has been, particularly with blockchain and these separate technology stacks, and
fair enough,
understanding mechanisms to create the interoperability, so that the good work that's being done in jurisdictions like Estonia can spread and be, having enhanced utility in other European jurisdictions.
Absolutely. And look, if we can just say like 2 words of hype for OECD, that was the main reason Estonia joined in the first place. Not to be in a cool club, but that's the value we saw from this particular network of countries.
Excellent.
Well, I think we have to wrap it up here. I mean, you had a final question, Ben, around prediction, and maybe a quick word also, Siim, how you make the transition between the private sector to government, but still advising government. I'm super interested in hearing that.
Yeah, I'll let you wrap it up, Cyrus, but that's basically it, Siim. So we'd like some predictions for the future. And Cyrus, did you have one other issue you wanted to tease
Well, yeah,
out?
no, very interested in the consultancy that Siim is putting together also, and how
definitely.
he can apply these lessons learned outside of Estonia.
Yeah, well, I can start from the latter. Look, at least in Estonia, the transition from public sector to private sector is not that big as you would assume, because we have a very sort of flexible system anyway. You can rotate in and out and so forth. And you can be also very intrapreneurial even within public sector from that point of view. But yeah, I think the difference is basically to be master of your own time. So if you're really an entrepreneur yourself, that's the difference, right? But look, what we clearly see is that, so with Digital Nation, we are like a pool or a network of experts from around the world, helping the other governments, build their digital societies up. We really see that, so perhaps the appetite for applying the sort of best practices from around the world is growing. I mean, there has been, like I said, a lot of lip service willingness to learn, but now I think sort of after quite a bit of failed attempts, I'm seeing a bit of uptick in a way to say, hey, help us really with practice about what really works. So obviously I'm upbeat about my own business in a way, but that's really was the hypothesis we built it on, and it seems to be true, especially in the markets that we are at, in Africa, in Middle East, in Central Eastern Europe. Predictions about future, well, that's always a big one, because as cliche as it sounds, I really believe that the future is not what we predict, but what we build it to be. So in that sense, I think I always like to sort of say, hey, look, the future is what, for example, we are trying to make it to be, right? So, I mean, if I'm somehow very, very fluffy with you here, I strongly see that, AI is here to stay. It's sort of exactly in private sector and private sphere, so much around us. It's about time to really penetrate like public sector strongly as well, because again, it just brings so much sort of, even today, so much benefits already. Secondly, I'm very optimistic that the future in a way is like in invisible services, that with the help of advanced tech like AI, but also even just good service design, we make bureaucracy fade into the background. And I mean, a lot of focus in the past has been trying to digitize the interaction with the government, but a lot of those interactions are actually unnecessary. So really just, having only those ones where public sector adds a value through, I don't know, advice or some other ways, these ones will remain. But the fact of basically getting like paperwork done, so to speak, doesn't have to perhaps happen at all anymore, even if it's a digital channel. So invisible services. And my last point, and this is where I think a lot of our thinking for advice for our client governments comes in, is to say that I really see that the difference between which countries succeed digitally or not is not their size, is not their legacy or whatever. It's in the speed of their decision making and their ability to get their act together. Very simple things in a way. Do you have a plan and to deliver? And I mean, obviously it might be easier in smaller countries because there's less people to convince, but fundamentally it's the factor of this sort of decision making and acting cycles that determines who runs faster and further.
Well, excellent. I think we have to wrap it here. Thank you so much, Siim. It's really a pleasure reconnecting.
Thank you.
And yeah, looking forward to hearing your progress as you move forward with your new venture.
Thank you, and good luck to exactly everyone listening or viewing.
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.